I'm live on YouTube. I can't. I'm banned on Facebook. Good rising, peace, not fucking division. I'm not a split tail transgender with an agenda. Fuck you. Good rising. How y'all doing today? Make sure you call your mother, your grandmother, and the citizens on patrol. Call the cops. Spot, call the cops. Call the COPS. Right? Call the cops. Call the citizens on patrol, sir. Call the cops. Call the neighborhood watch program and acknowledge the fact that Facebook is digital surveillance. Hi, Sophia. Let's acknowledge AI in the room. AI is always monitoring people. Huh? All they know is what they. All you know is what they show you on the chalkboard. Vocabulary is control. There's 113,000 words in English. How many do you know? 1,000. And if you only know 1,000 words, is it your fault? Is it the school system's fault? Whose fault is it? I'm just saying it like that. Leave it at that. You use words to define reality. Words cause frequency. When you speak words, people see visions in their head because of the speech you gave or the things you said. When you speak, you cause a hologram to appear in somebody's mind because of the words you're saying. So when I speak frequency, you're seeing vivid imagery in your head because of what I said. But understanding that, it changes how you're going to speak to somebody else because you know that they're seeing pictures in their mind because of the words that you're speaking out loud for their mind to hear. The brain is full of crystals, and the brain vibrates the frequency of the words that were spoken. And it causes and creates that frequency in the mind. And it creates the hologram.
Have I lost you yet? Have I lost you? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? They are English, plain Jane. Or do you only understand King's English?
It's pretty fucking amazing. Your head is full of water. And there's a sack of crystals in there. That gray matter, cut it open. It's got particulate crystals in there. When your skull vibrates, your brain vibrates, those crystals catch the resonance from those frequencies and causes and creates the picture in your mind. I can only imagine what I just did to somebody's brain because I said that shit out loud. I put the picture in their head. But they train salespeople to understand these concepts. They train politicians to understand these concepts. This is not unknown, it's uncommon knowledge.
Yeah.
It's uncommon knowledge. So let's take a look at this bit by Fauci. This will get you laughing because he's being grilled by Congress the other day. Right? On my YouTube channel wall, there's a list of videos titled Fauci, things I've watched. You know, I try to keep track of the things I watched. I got to clean up the list a little bit. It gets a little crazy when you realize the world is a stage. It's just fucking actors. When you realize those concepts are way more serious than what you ever thought in your life. They start coming up with different ideas about certain things. Immortality, vampires. The fuck is going on? People of the night, incubus, succubus. Those are different words, but they gear towards understanding cannibalism, vampirism. We see this shit in the movies and we think sci-fi, we think fantasy. Oh, that's not real.
I don't want to sell a team with.
But my people, their religion is what you're watching on television. Their God isn't your God. Their God isn't your God. Right, so it's Tucker Carlson. I haven't even watched this yet. I'm like, oh my God, look at this. Look at the headline. I'm about headlines. I look at the headline before I even decide to listen or not. Tucker last night, 8 hours ago. Fauci deserves to be under criminal investigation. And remember, Peanuts, my other channel was erased because of this very fucking conversation topic.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight.
I'm a week ahead of you, Tucker.
Fauci is obvious now and it's widely acknowledged, but it was not always obvious. In March of last year, we interviewed Fauci on the show. We treated him with respect. We took his answers seriously. We're Americans, so we assumed the man in charge of protecting the U.S. from COVID must be rational and impressive. We also assumed he must be honest. But we were wrong. It soon became clear that Tony Fauci was just another sleazy federal bureaucrat, deeply political and often dishonest. More shocking than that, we then learned that Fauci himself was implicated in the very pandemic he'd been charged with fighting. More shocking than that, we then learned that Fauci himself was implicated in the very pandemic he'd been charged with fighting. Learned that Fauci himself was implicated in the very pandemic he'd been charged with fighting. Fauci himself was implicated in the very pandemic he'd been charged with fighting. Fauci.
You can't tell positive from negative, crazy from genius. You can't tell the difference. You're fucking mediocre. What do you know? You know nothing at all. You're stuck in a pit. You can't tell positive from negative, crazy from genius. You can't tell the difference. You're fucking mediocre. What do you know? You know nothing at all. You're stuck in a pit. You can't tell positive from negative, crazy from genius. You can't tell the difference. You're fucking mediocre. What do you know? You know nothing at all. You're stuck in a pit. You can't tell positive from negative, crazy from genius. You can't tell the difference. You're fucking mediocre. What do you know? You know nothing at all. You're stuck in a pit.
Here, he said he can. So at least you'll have some games for your Game Boy Advance. If you want to sell just a Pokemon.
He wants.
He can do 200.
He wants. Huh?
Huh?
He wants to do.
I don't know. You just read through the whole thing. You want? You can do 200 now. You want?
That's for the old Game
I
Boy.
don't know. Just read through the whole thing.
You can't tell positive from negative, crazy from genius. You can't tell the difference. You're fucking mediocre. What do you know? You know nothing at all. You're stuck in a pit. You can't tell positive from negative, crazy from genius. You can't tell the difference. You're fucking mediocre. What do you know? You know nothing at all. You're stuck in a pit. You can't tell positive from negative, crazy from genius. You can't tell the difference. You're fucking mediocre. What do you know?
He doesn't know he's off.
You know nothing at all. You're stuck in a pit. You can't tell positive from negative, crazy from genius. You can't tell the difference. You're fucking mediocre. What do you know? You know nothing at all. You're stuck in a pit.
I hate selling these things. Stupid people. Can you? It's not that one. I like things simple. Like the Wii, I don't have to sell online. This one's too complex for me.
Fauci, we don't know whether the pandemic started in a lab in Wuhan or evolved naturally, but we should want to know. 3 million people have died from this pandemic, and that should cause us to explore all possibilities. Instead, government authorities, self-interested in continuing gain-of-function research, say there's nothing to see here. Gain-of-function research, as you know, is juicing up naturally occurring animal viruses to infect humans. To arrive at the truth, the U.S. government should admit that the Wuhan Virology Institute was experimenting to enhance the coronavirus's ability to infect humans. Juicing up superviruses is not new. Scientists in the U.S. have long known how to mutate animal viruses to infect humans. For years, Dr. Ralph Baric, a virologist in the U.S., has been collaborating with Dr. Shi Zhengli of the Wuhan Virology Institute, sharing his discoveries about how to create superviruses. This gain-of-function research has been funded by the NIH. The collaboration between the U.S. and the Wuhan Virology Institute continues. Doctors Baric and Shi worked together to insert bat virus spike protein into the backbone of the deadly SARS virus, and then used this man-made supervirus to infect human airway cells. Think about that for a moment. The SARS virus had a 15% mortality. We're fighting a pandemic that has about a 1% mortality. Can you imagine if a SARS virus that's been juiced up and had viral proteins added to it, to the spike protein, if that were released accidentally? Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain of function research in the Wuhan Institute
Do they
of
fund
Virology.
Dr. Barrick?
We do not fund.
Do you fund
gain-
Dr. Barrick's gain of function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain of function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina, not
You don't think
in
inserting
China.
a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain of function?
That
You
is
would
not.
be in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain of function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain of function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
So
they
do you
write
still
about it.
support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
We do not send money now to Wuhan
Do you
Virology
support
Institute.
sending money? We did under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. It was a sub-agency
Right.
and a sub-grant. Do you support the money from NIH that was going to the Wuhan Institute?
Let me explain to you why that was done. The SARS-CoV-1 originated in bats in China. It would have been irresponsible of us if we did not investigate the bat viruses and the serology to see who might have been
Or
infected.
perhaps it would be
in China.
irresponsible to send it to the Chinese government that we may not be able to trust with this knowledge and with this incredibly dangerous viruses. Government scientists like yourself who favor gain of function research.
I don't favor gain of function research in
This
China.
disease
You are
arose
saying things
naturally.
that are not correct.
Government defenders of gain of function, such as yourself, say that COVID-19 mutations were random and not designed by man. But interestingly, the technique that Dr. Barrick developed forces mutations by serial passage through cell culture that the mutations appear to be natural. In fact, Dr. Barrick named the technique the no-see-em technique because the mutations appear naturally. Nicholas Baker in the New York Magazine said nobody would know if the virus had been fabricated in a laboratory or grown in nature. Government authorities in the U.S., including yourself, unequivocally deny that COVID-19 could have escaped a lab. But even Dr. Shi in Wuhan, according to Nicholas Baker, Dr. Shi wondered, could this new virus have come from her own laboratory? She checked her records frantically and found no matches. That really took a load off my mind, she said. I had not slept for days. The director of the gain of function research in Wuhan couldn't sleep because she was terrified that it might be in her lab. Dr. Barrick, an advocate of gain of function research, admits the main problem that the Institute of Virology has is the outbreak occurred in close proximity. What are the odds? Barrick responded, could you rule out a laboratory escape? The answer in this case is probably not. Will you, in front of this group, categorically say that the COVID-19 could not have occurred through serial passage in a laboratory?
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on in China. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain of function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of
You
Virology.
support it in the U.S. We have 11 labs doing it, and you have allowed it here. We have a committee to do it, but the committee has granted every exemption. You're fooling with Mother Nature here. You're allowing super viruses to be created with a 15% mortality. It's very dangerous. I think it was a huge mistake to share this with China, and it's a huge mistake to allow this to continue in the United States. And we should be very careful to investigate where this virus came from.
I fully agree that you should investigate where the virus came from. But again, we have not funded gain-of-function research on this virus in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, no matter how many times
You're parsing
you say
words.
it,
There
it
was
didn't happen.
research. There was research done with Dr. Shi and Dr. Barrick. They have collaborated on gain-of-function research where they enhanced the SARS virus to infect human airway cells, and they did it by merging a new spike protein on it. That is gain-of-function. That was joint research between the Wuhan Institute and Dr. Barrick. You can't deny it.
Senator Paul, your time has expired. Dr. Fauci, I will let you respond to that when we need to move on.
Excuse me?
I will allow you to respond to that, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, I don't know how many times I can say it, Madam Chair. We did not fund gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
I don't know, you guys. How y'all doing today? Doesn't it come down to trusting yourself or trusting in leadership? Do you trust Fauci? I don't know anybody that trusts Fauci. Do you? It's all about establishing credibility right now. Today. Chop chop. Right now. Not tomorrow.
Virus that's been juiced up and had viral. That's been juiced up and had viral. That's been juiced up and had viral. That's been juiced up.
Good rising. Good rising. Frontier psychology here. Do you trust yourselves or do you trust Fauci? You don't have to believe anything I'm saying to you. Isn't that cool? Do you think Peter Darcet gives a fuck about your sons or daughters? Do you think Fauci gives a fuck about your children? Should you trust silent people? I don't trust silent people. They're usually up to no good. Can't trust them. Can't believe them for anything. Can't have faith in them either. Can't work with them. They're always working against you. Never for you. Always against. And you're either for or against the messaging. Some people think I have a vivid imagination. I tell them it's a healthy dose of skepticism. I just don't believe anyone. There's no money in it. No profits in it. None for me, anyway. And silence doesn't profit you at all. It only profits the one that causes it. Do you trust these people? Because I wouldn't want them babysitting my children. They'd probably rape them, have them for dinner. Are you going to tell anybody my attitude? Are you going to advertise for me? You going to tell on me? I have it under good assumption that a third of you are snitches, government employees, informants, trolls. It's an assumption that I'm willing to work with. So 1/3 of people are going to talk shit about you behind your back and never to your face. And the people that hate you are never going to announce themselves to your face. They're too busy prodding behind your backside. It's amazing, isn't it? What should I trust? Myself, your silence, or their leadership? Huh? Can't ever get a straight answer from these professionals. I don't actually think they know what they're talking about. Do you? Welcome to group therapy. I'll have you know that I just got a 30-day ban on Facebook for these questions. Whose fucking name is that right there? Mine, right? It's mine. Just checking. It's my channel, right? My news floor?
Yeah,
My channel?
yeah.
My blog? My editorial? My fucking commentary? A result of my goddamn life experience and my fucking education. These cocksuckers sit silent like goddamn fucking whores? Where's the respect? I don't respect your silence. See? Their silence is a sign of their fucking stupidity. There ain't no need to be nice about it anymore. Hey, Jack. Hey, Jack. Men don't get paid in this world. They get used. They get fed off of. They get sent to die in wars they don't believe in. Quality over quantity, Jack. One's worth 100 most days of the week. I myself am worth 10 Mexicans. Because I don't say can't, or couldn't, or wouldn't, or shouldn't. You don't hire Americans. You only hire Mexicans. You hire outside of the country to service within the country. It's amazing. They can't do anything. They can't be bothered to lift a finger, Jack. Share, contribute. All they want to do is compete with my live feeds. And here I sit talking about genocide and mass fucking murder and the theft of my son. And I'm supposed to what? What am I supposed to do, Jack? Give a fuck about your mouth? I learned all these things on the streets. Didn't learn them in a school. No one spoon-fed me. I don't even get fed for teaching anything. I don't get credit. People steal credit. And my children. Right? My gosh. Child snatchers. A whole new level of low for you. Only because I want to see the fucking death of so many of you. I want to kill you all. I want to outlive you. That's my new inspiration. I was supposed to be dead 25 years ago. Now I realize I'm going to outlive the vaccinated. I'm going to see the death of you. And I'm not going to bury you. You can argue about it. They're already dead. They don't give a fuck about anything but themselves and their carnal needs, right? They're already dead. Been dead. assumed dead since birth. It's amazing. Yeah, no, most people never live a day in their lives. They never learn anything because they never suffer from anything. Without suffering, they don't learn. Doesn't get you anywhere. Gets you disrespected, spit on, kicked, beat. Doesn't get you fed. No. Doesn't get you respect either. Your children get stolen. It's amazing. I'm supposed to be a happy guy, Jack. They're sad I'm not happy with the theft of my son. They're disappointed I haven't killed myself yet. That's the level of respect I get. It's amazing. No, I will never go on another person's floor ever again. They don't respect my floor. And I'm not going to go on somebody else's floor to try to garner or gain respect. And then they'll be able to feed off my name. Yeah, fuck all that noise. Nobody wants to come on my floor and start shit either. See how that works? So it's like a Mexican standoff. They're all fucking triggered and shit. And they know better than to open their mouths. In the high 90s. High 90s. Like 97%. And you only need 3% to change anything, because 93% of people just go with the tide. Nobody. I know. They don't bother to watch. They can't be active. My gosh, they expect to be food spoon fed. Right? I got to spoon feed them. And then I got to pay them to think. These fucking whores. Prostitutes. Right, Jack? I got to pay them to think. I got to pay them to feel fucking some kind of way. I got to pay them. But they're not going to pay me. Nothing but disrespect. Why do you think I hang out by myself all day, every day? I'd rather stay by myself. No one pays me to think. Been this way my whole life. Isn't that amazing? Criminalized my entire life for thinking. I should get a goddamn trophy for not following orders. You fucking whores. Huh? Because that's really what it boils down to. I should get a goddamn trophy for not following orders well. For challenging them. I've had several ideas about it. Erica here is a piece of that. That's why Draco is such a big deal, Jack. Because Erica is from the other side of the world, mixing the gene pool with my DNA and her DNA from the other side of the world, East religion, West, East. Everything she knows, I knows, is in my son to know. My son's already a fucking genius. I'm a genius. My son's, oof, I don't even know. That's why they stole him. Can't have that evolution in genetics. Wasn't controlled by the church or the fucking state. Now you can start to see why I'm so goddamn pissed off. Because that's all they're trying to do is control the gene pool. I wasn't gonna fucking name him Todd or Tom, Dick, or Harry, Larry, Curdy, Moe. I'm not gonna name him after the fucking stooges. Do I sound like a goddamn stooge? I sound like a dragon. My son's gonna be a dragon. That's what they're terrified of. Right? No, they think I'm stupid, Jack. That's what it is. It must be the beard that throws them off. Sexist and racist to have a beard. Violation of the law. Believe me, this shit's not fun for me. Why would it be? Right? Why would this be fun? Does this even look fun to you? Huh? Does this fucking look like I'm having fun? Right? Ask yourself. Is he fucking having fun right now? I have people inboxing me, Jack, asking me, where do you get all this shit? Right? Where do you get all this shit, man? Right? Where does this come from? You can't Google any of this stuff. Right? Where the fuck do you get it from? And then I told them something really freaky. I said, I don't go looking. Right? That has to be freaky to an outsider on the out in on the outside looking in. Where do you get all this shit, man? There's no list, right? There's no list for this shit. How do you figure all this shit out, man? Without a license, without financial funding from anyone, right? I don't go goddamn looking for any of it. It just shows up on my door and they think that's a figure of speech. What? I don't go looking for any of it. At all. Ever. Ever. Right? Never. Never ever. What the fuck? And you think somebody is gonna do this, right? Have this conversation, force it, truth in animation, not in the news. Politicians are lying whores and your parents are repeating after them. Who the fuck is gonna say what I just said? And mean it. What? I'm going back and forth right now, Jack. This couple years ago, you remember this stunt? I was laughing about that stunt. Yeah. Shit. Right? They were talking about that bitch getting bitch slapped for months. It was amazing. You don't want to get slapped by me. You wind up on the fucking floor. Had a goddamn cushion on his cheek. Little pad, soften the blow. What a bitch. Can't even take a hit. Glass jaw. Hmm. Right? I've got a gap in my employment record that's like 20 years. And because of it, I'm not hireable. You know what I mean? Right? There's so much that just comes to me, man, and you would wind up in therapy. And for me, this is therapy. I rest easy because I said what was on my mind, and well, it ain't my fault they don't listen. How are you supposed when you see shit like this? How the fuck are you supposed to trust them? Right? Right? When you see all the signs, how are you supposed to trust them? Right? This I made 3 years ago. No one wanted to talk about it then, and they still don't want to talk about it now. I answer the calling. Consciousness goes where consciousness flows, and they're not consciously flowing, so they're not consciously knowing of anything. They're only repeating talking points. It naturally comes to me because it was my calling to know these things. Calling. Ka. Ka is the Egyptian word for spirit or soul. It's put on my soul to know. Believe me, I don't want to know. Who the hell would want to know any of this shit? Amazing. Right?
Society doesn't condone truthful speech. Society doesn't approve of intellect outside of the classroom. So anybody outside of the classroom, their voices aren't going to be heard by the mass. The people going to those schools, they think they're smarter than everybody because of their degrees. But as you raise up in degrees in society, you regress consciously. You're trading your soul a degree at a time. Your soul time. Even Steve Jobs. Your time is your money. Not money to sell. Your time is your money.
Oh, it's lovely. Mm. Good evening. Welcome to group therapy. Some people ask me where these things come from. I said, it just comes to me, and then I start looking. And notice you answer your questions. You don't wait for other people to answer your questions for you. They're not going to. They don't have the capability.
Most governments are run by a small group of people for their own benefit without reference to what the majority wants. We are supporting a government, paying for the entire government that has banned opposition parties, put opposition leaders in jail, shutting down free speech.
With furrowed brows and a solemn tone, he dives into the tumultuous state of the nation, leaving no stone unturned.
You can have a system that nobody actually supports except the people directly benefiting from it. This is the main thing I've learned in the past 5 years I'm 54, I've lived in this country my whole life. And because I, unlike everyone else in Washington, actually kind of believed in the basic premise of democracy, which is the majority rules, that's the most basic fact of democracy. The people run their own government.
You often hear people say the news is full of lies, but most of the time that's not exactly right. Much of what you see on television or read the New York Times is in fact true in the literal sense. It could pass one of the media's own fact checks. Lawyers would be willing to sign off on it. In fact, they may have. But that doesn't make it true. It's not true. There are clergy who are being thrown in prison.
Convents raided, nuns kicked out, priests handcuffed, thrown in jail. So, I mean, on one level, you think, well, it's not my country. You know, they do all kinds of barbaric things around the world. Can't be upset about all of them. Much more interested in what's happening in El Paso than I am in Kiev. If you get a majority of people to vote for something, that's now the law. And that's totally untrue. You can put it in a ballot referendum, some judge will overturn it. Well, what about democracy? You can spend billions of dollars on a foreign policy theory that nobody actually supports.
Amidst the cacophony of societal discord, his words become a call for introspection and reconciliation.
If I tell you that a man has been unjustly arrested for armed robbery, that is not, strictly speaking, a lie. He may have been framed. At this point, there's been no trial, so no one can really say. But if I don't mention the fact that the same man has been arrested for the same 6 times before, am I really informing you? No, I'm not. I'm misleading you. And that's what the news media are doing in every story that matters, every day of the week, every week of the year.
A country without free speech is not a democracy. Free speech is a prerequisite to democracy. You can't have it without it. You can't have a dinner party without dinner. You can't have a democracy without free speech, period. In the end, most governments are run by a small group of people for their own benefit without reference to what the majority wants. And I hate to believe that that's true in this country, but all the evidence suggests that it is. In fact, it's provable. You know how you prove it? Public opinion polling. Take a look at the latest Gallup poll. Pick a poll. What are the top 10 issues for people in the United States? And then compare those to the priorities of your leaders. So people are leaving Michigan because it's very hard to make a living here, and you're constantly hassled by a government that never stops growing and that is leeching off an economy that hasn't grown in decades, okay? That's the truth. Take a look at the priorities of the low IQ lunatic who's running your state, Gretchen Whitmer, who deserves zero respect, no respect. Her priorities are what? Putting you in jail if you, quote, misgender somebody? What percentage of the population of the state of Michigan, even southeastern Michigan, is on board with that as a top concern? It's like roughly around 0.1%, okay, in that range. The things that people care about, Gretchen Whitmer couldn't care less about, because democracy isn't functioning.
And I want to pause right here, you guys, and say that there's no difference between Gretchen, the governor of Michigan, and the governor of Maine, Janet Mills. If you think Janet Mills is any different, you're out of your fucking mind. They told a party line. I'm speaking my mind, and they don't respect what's on my mind.
If democracy was functioning in America, in Michigan, in California, the District of Columbia, where I live, state of Maine, the state of Texas.
Through the lens of his analysis, Carlson emerges as a societal critic, shining a spotlight on the complexities of modern American life.
What's it like to work in a system like that? After more than 30 years in the middle of it, we could tell you stories. The best you can hope for in the news business at this point is the freedom to tell the fullest truth that you can. But there are always limits. And you know that if you bump up against those limits often enough, you will be fired for it. That's not a guess, it's guaranteed. Every person who works in English language media understands that. The rule of what you can't say defines everything. It's filthy, really, and it's utterly corrupting. You can't have a free society if people aren't allowed to say what they think is true. Speech is the fundamental prerequisite for democracy. That's why it's enshrined in the first of our constitutional amendments.
Not only do we not have that conversation was literally banned. Now it's in the guidelines of most of the big social media companies. You can't have that conversation. So I would make a couple of points. And the most obvious one is any country that doesn't allow a free discussion of the process by which its leaders are elected is not a democracy, by definition. How many Texans do you think are all on board with letting 7 million people cross into their state illegally? What?
Eve to me is basically freedom. It's a giant open universe where.
What percentage? Zero. I don't care what your race or national origin. Nobody is for that. That's insane. Has the governor of Texas done anything meaningful to stop that? No. The Republican governor? He's got a National Guard. He's the commander-in-chief of the National Guard, and it's Texas, so they're all large. And they have double-stack magazines in their sidearms. You think they couldn't stop that in a week if they? Of course. Just assemble along the border. We're not doing this. No, he refuses to do that. He won't do it. And it's not like no one suggested. I've suggested to him 3 times, including in private at a cocktail party in Dallas last year. What are you doing, man? Don't you have a National Guard? Why don't you seal the border? Oh, it's very complicated. No, it's not. No, it's not. If someone's trying to break into my house, it's not complicated to repel the person. Do you have a firearm or don't? Are you willing to defend your house and your children, or aren't you? Well, it's more complicated. That really, tell me how. Speak slowly so I can understand. It's not more complicated than that. It's more dishonest than that. You're lying to me. You don't want to do it because your donors don't want you to do it. It's that simple. Greg Abbott. Liar, and worse than liar, betrayer of your own people. That's what that is. I was polite at the cocktail party, so I didn't say any of that, but I fumed internally like an Episcopalian. I thought those things. But the point is, if you assume that just because everybody wants something, you're going to get it, think again, pal. It's very likely that, in fact, you won't get anything that you want. You will just pay for what a small group of other people want. That's the way it works. Boo is right. Boo is right. It's not just frustrating. It's a betrayal of the core promise of the country, which is the people rule. That's an act.
In the realm of public discourse, he stands as a voice of reason, urging citizens to confront the challenges that divide them.
And yet at the same time, and this is the amazing thing, the undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources. When was the last time you heard a legitimate debate about any of those issues? It's been a long time. Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. Suddenly, the United States looks very much like a one-party state. That's a depressing realization, but it's not permanent. Our current orthodoxies won't last. They're brain. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them. This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't. The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. At the same time, the liars who've been trying to silence them shrink, and they become weaker. That's the iron law of the universe. True things prevail. Where can you still find Americans saying true things? There aren't many places left, but there are some, and that's enough. As long as you can hear the words, there is hope.
Well, just to put this in context, it's not just like you have boutique, weird right-wing views and that's how they want you to feel. Like, oh, you're an extremist. Really? I'm an extremist? I'm going to let 7 million people into our country illegally, whose names we don't know?
Carlson embodies the collective desire for unity, giving voice to those who yearn for a more harmonious America.
By the way, it's so interesting, and narcissists are this way, the projection involved. It's like whatever it is they're doing, and I mean at a precise level, is exactly what they accuse you of doing. You're attacking democracy. Really, I like democracy. Democracy would give people without money and without a TV show some voice in how they are governed. Therefore, I'm for it. And they want exactly the opposite. So the middle class in America, which has been not the majority since 2015, an anniversary that nobody noticed, has less economic power than it's ever had. That's why Trump got elected, in my view. And now it has less political power.
than it's ever had. So if you are taking power away from large segments of your population, you are by definition attacking democracy. That's exactly what you're doing. There's no other name for it. So that's the
Ever seen a military monocular lens that can zoom in on objects miles away? You're about to. Dude, you got to hear about this thing. It's like having the eyes of a hawk in your pocket. So there's this gadget, right? Developed for the US Special Forces, and it's wild. Picture this, a tiny device, practically a telescope that fits right in your pocket. But don't let its size fool you. This bad...
first thing I noticed. In the name of defending democracy, we took away the things we need to have democracy, which is our core freedoms guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. Just as in our war for democracy, we are supporting a government, paying for the entire government that has banned opposition parties, put opposition leaders in jail, shutting down free speech, now shutting down an election, and putting dissident priests in prison. It's
pausing right there for a second. I want to interject. I always like throw a few things at you. Hi, you guys. What happens when there's more jobs in government than in private sector? Just to show you that I'm able to think for myself, and I don't need anyone to think for me. We got about 180, 190 million jobs in this country, and about 90 million, 100 million of them are in the government sector. Which means that there's more jobs in government than there is in private. Is that good or bad for an economy?
such a democracy, they don't have elections anymore. That's how pure a democracy it is. But the second thing, and what's I think more applicable to this conversation, I learned, is that their response was the tell. If you want to know what they care about, if you want to know what's important, listen to how they respond when you say something unapproved about it.
His candid assessment serves as a clarion call, imploring us all to seek common ground and understanding.
Amazingly, as of tonight, there aren't many platforms left that allow free speech. The last big one remaining in the world, the only one, is Twitter, where we are now. Twitter has long served as the place where our national conversation incubates and develops. Twitter is not a partisan site. Everybody's allowed here, and we think that's a good thing. And yet, for the most part, the news that you see analyzed on Twitter comes from media organizations that are themselves thinly disguised propaganda outlets. You see it on cable news, you talk about it on Twitter. The result may feel like a debate, but actually the gatekeepers are still in charge. We think that's a bad system. We know exactly how it works, and we're sick of it. Starting soon, we'll be bringing a new version of the show we've been doing for the last 6.5 years to Twitter. We bring some other things too, which we'll tell you about. But for now, we're just grateful to be here. Free speech is the main right that you have. Without it, you have no others.
As the dramatic narrative of his commentary unfolds, Carlson's resonating voice remains a reminder that the path to healing and progress begins with acknowledging the challenges that confront us.
So you have religious freedom or freedom of speech or freedom of assembly as long as you stay within the lines. But if you express an unapproved view, then you go to jail. But that's freedom, isn't it? You do exactly what I tell you to do, or else I imprison you. Is that the freedom that you recognize? No, that's insane. And so that irritated me. And I said, well, but don't you think as a Christian leader, you should say something when Christian clergy are imprisoned for their views? No. And how dare you say that? And this person was joined by a chorus of people on the right. Yeah, shut up. Shut up. National Review wrote a piece this morning. Shut up is bigoted to notice that Christian clergy are being imprisoned. And my view would be, maybe you care, maybe you don't. But if you're a Christian leader and Christians are going to jail for their views, you are required to say something. And if you don't, you're not much of a Christian leader. And by the way, the person I was speaking to is a person, I think, of real faith and of decency. Like, I would let him babysit my kids. Not for long, but for dinner. I mean, I don't think he's like an evil person. He's not a secret serial on Long Island or something that I know of. But he, with a straight face, told me this. And he said, but what really needs, and I say this as a Christian leader, is more cluster bombs. And I thought, you know who it was. And I thought to myself, more cluster bombs. Now, I am not a Bible scholar. But I'm pretty sure, having read 4 out of 4 Gospels,
You're the person with the gun, the person who would do anything to protect the ones you love. But did you know that
like Luke 17 doesn't call for shower cluster bombs on the children. In fact, I'm just going to go out on a limb as a non-theologian and say the overriding message of the New Testament is bring peace.
But there's a more modern motivation for Xi Jinping, which is, wait a minute. If I now have control over that island, I have control over the entire United States. We are actually the ones responsible for driving that Russia-China military alliance.
With the vigilance of a global watchdog, Carlson delves into the labyrinthine corridors of international affairs, revealing a tale that suggests China's calculated maneuvers with far-reaching implications.
It's complicated because a lot of it relies on know-how. So it's not just raw production capability, but it's the know-how of how you actually make it. And so I think that requires pulling people from, TSMC in Taiwan to the United States. And I think that that's something that we should be intensely focused on right now.
We really should be concerned with the situation in Taiwan. And here's why. Thanks to the Pelosi family and her eldest son, I think it's Ted or Todd or Turner or something with a T. I can't fucking remember. It doesn't really matter to me. They use my tax dollars and your tax dollars to establish a microchip processing plant in Taiwan. And those microchip processors are for your computers and they're for your military grade equipment, for your tanks, for your ships, for your planes, for your fingerprint recognition scanners on your handheld guns, etc., etc. They make all the computer chips for the military in Taiwan. They don't make them here in America. Come to think about it, if you really thought about it, you come to the conclusion that we don't actually mass produce anything here. We like to sell a lot of bullshit, though. Right? Notice that I've been streaming for 96 minutes without any dissidents. Right? No one's disagreed with anything that I've said so far. 96 straight minutes. It's amazing. Right? And I don't have a degree from any of these fucking educated universities. Nope. Not a theologian. Nope. Nope. Not even a Christian. You know what I am? I'm a gnosis. And I noticed this. Silence to a thing is consent to the thing that was said. I noticed that a long time ago, and I started using it as a tool in my back pocket. Silence is a weapon of oppression. If you don't speak, then you're silently consenting to me. It's amazing. So China will gain control of Taiwan and then have complete control over all the microprocessors for the United States military. Isn't that amazing?
Now, nobody in either party is talking about this right now. The Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat that the U.S. actually faces today. And we are pushing Russia closer into China's arms by actually continuing to arm.
We now have Putin's back to the wall. Well, Putin is the world's leading superpower. We aren't. He's got 1,000 more than we do, and they are much better than ours. They can shut down ours. We can't shut down theirs.
Against the backdrop of the reality that we face, which is we are driving Russia further into China's arms as we are further strengthening what I see as the single greatest military threat that the United States certainly has faced since World War II. You could make a case that the United States has ever faced if you actually look at where this could be going.
His words echo like an international alarm, resounding across borders, prompting us to reevaluate the intricate dance of global politics and its profound consequences.
we get something greater in return, which is that Putin, in that case, would have to exit his military partnership with China and remove weapons from Kaliningrad, which border Poland, and get the Russian military out of Cuba and Venezuela and the West. And this is a deal that Putin should do because he ends up winning. He gets things that he doesn't have today, but it secures American interests too.
We have pushed Russia into the embrace of China, which is the worst foreign policy outcome imaginable. It is not good for the national security of our country.
We are actually the ones responsible.
This AI tool will take your idea and create a complete book, complete with design, images, layout, everything, including the content, literally.
For driving that Russia-China military alliance. And so one of my advantages is that I am not, some people say, well, you don't have foreign policy experience. And I'll say, yes, I don't have foreign policy experience. And that may actually be an advantage in bringing a rational American.
So you're not responsible for the war in Iraq.
Yeah,
that's
no.
a bad thing.
Yeah, well, I think we could debate whether it's a bad thing or not. But if you break the car, you don't turn over the keys to the guy who broke it. That's what I would say. And so, I think that we are on our way to turning into another Iraq or another Vietnam all over again. Except this time, I think it could be worse because there's weapons at issue. There's an alliance with China, an economy that we depend on for our modern way of life that's also at issue.
And the irony is, I think a lot of people today believe that somehow world leaders make their decisions by analogy. So Xi Jinping is going to say, oh, well, because Vladimir Putin walked away with a piece of that he didn't have, that somehow means that by analogy, I'm going to be judged more favorably if I go after Taiwan and walk away with a piece of Taiwan that I didn't have, when I basically don't think that's how autocrats or any global leader should, or at least does, make decisions. To the contrary, I think what's actually more likely to happen is we're going to put Xi Jinping in a more likely position to go after Taiwan sooner because he knows that Russia's in his camp because they're in a more solid alliance.
There's nothing
the United States
about it.
Yeah, on Taiwan, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's mostly right. Now, my view is this is also another heresy that I think have recently managed to cross last night, which is that I think our commitments to go to war in that situation, or to at least even militarily engage in that situation, should change if it's before or after we have semiconductor independence in this country.
As the world listens, Tucker Carlson's voice becomes a clarion call for those who value sovereignty and geopolitical stability, regardless of their national allegiance.
We are going up against, we are provoking a confrontation that could very easily lead to war. And I've talked to.
Wait, can I ask you to pause there for a second? Everything you've said is checkable and rational, and you're extrapolating out toward the future, which is easy to envision. Like, I don't understand how our policymakers aren't reaching the same conclusions you just reached. Like, they think that war with Russia is war we're going to win.
We cannot win this war.
Well, of course. So what are they doing? I don't understand.
It would be like Mexico beating us in a war. They're not going to they cannot lose this war. And, anybody who thinks Russia is not up to the war, go look at the Netflix documentary on Stalingrad and look at the sacrifice that Russians are willing to make. Putin today, we thought this was going to hurt him. He's more popular than he's ever been. All the U.S. polling firms show him polling at 90% popularity. And in Russia, the Russians are supporting him. And he also, we were going to break him with the sanctions. We did the opposite. We made him more powerful. He's now insulated from from trade and the international banking system. He's now got this great trade agreement with China. He's now, engineering the creation of BRICS, which he has 40 leading nations around the world turning against the U.S. currency as a reserve currency and adopting his petrocurrency or the Chinese currency. That is the worst threat to the United States. That will plunge. If we lose that status as the world's reserve currency, the Great Depression will look like a cake.
Within this exploration of geopolitical intrigue, a tapestry of geopolitical chess moves unfolds, inviting everyone to analyze the strategies and motives.
Don't buy another pair of glasses until you've seen what this new invention can do. These self-adjustable glasses are taking the world by storm. They let you achieve a perfect 20/20 vision at any distance, which means you won't have
of nations on the world stage.
China has two reasons to want to go for Taiwan. Okay. One is a nationalistic reason, which is that back in 1949, they had this complicated civil war. Chiang Kai-shek, went to Taiwan and claimed that that was actually where the real Republic of China was based. And Mao Zedong said, no, it's the Communist Party of China out of Beijing. And for the longest time, actually, the US and the UN recognized actually the real China as being run out of Taipei. But at some point along the way, switched to saying, no, it's actually run out of Beijing. And so there's this nationalistic thing going on that's super complicated history over there. But there's a more modern motivation for Xi Jinping, which is, wait a minute. If I now have control over that island, I have control over the entire United States because I now have the economic leverage to get to a deal that the US wouldn't have said yes to. And I think what Xi Jinping is going for is the basic deal where he says, I get to make your stuff as long as I get all of your IP and everything else in return. And right now, if he says that to the US, we're not going to go for that deal. But if he's squatting on the semiconductor supply chain, well, then that's how we ultimately get to parity, consummate the codependent relationship. And I think that's step one of a broader conquest of the modern West.
How hard would it be to achieve, as you said, semiconductor independence in the United States?
It's not going to be easy, but I'm confident that with focus, I can lead us there by the end of my first term in office. And my basic rule of thumb on this one, Tucker, is just to be very practical, looking at this from American interests. I do not consent to Xi Jinping holding an economic to our head and lording that over for the next 100 years of the future of the United States. But if we're no longer dependent on that tiny island nation, then I will not send our sons and daughters to over somebody else's nationalistic dispute.
In other words, the country with more ships than any navy in the world has united with the country that has more armed ICBMs than any country in the world to fight us through proxy. Well, that's scary. And the thing is, everybody involved seems to know it's scary and just how scary it is. Our leaders understand that their push for total war with Putin, which is unnecessary, could lead to the destruction of the West. They know that, but they're doing it anyway. In an interview with a German newspaper today, President Zelensky casually mentioned that, oh, by the way, the entire world may soon go up in flames. Quote, if China aligns itself with Russia, there will be a world war. There will be a world war if China aligns with Russia? Who could say something like that calmly? Since, as we just told you, China is aligned with Russia. It's already happened. That's not speculation. It's a fact. And as a result of that fact, according to Zelensky himself, hundreds of millions of people will. No big deal, as long as we take Crimea.
The spotlight narrows on Tucker Carlson, an intrepid commentator unafraid to shed light on the complex interplay of global powers.
Oil is the densest store of transportable energy known to man. So unlike fiat currencies like the dollar, oil will always have value. That's why Russia is not now impoverished, because they have a lot of oil. But we have less because the SPR has been drained. In the last fiscal year, the Biden administration sold off 218 million barrels of oil, including, bewilderingly, to the government of China. How much oil is that? It's more oil sold from the SPR in 1 year than in all previous years combined. So what happens when we empty it? Well, there's not much left. But what about our gold? America's gold reserves have not been fully audited in generations. So they can say whatever they want. But the truth is, we don't really know how much gold is in Fort Knox. So the SPR becomes even more vital, and now it's disappearing. And as it does, the power of the United States ebbs. At some point, what's going to be left? They'll be draining the Great Lakes and shipping the water to the Gobi Desert for cotton farming. They'll be selling the curtains. So how do you fix this? Well, ending the war immediately would help, which we could do because we're in charge of NATO, but we're not even trying. In fact, we're pushing even harder for a direct conflict with armed Russia. Only a man completely insulated from the consequences of his bloodlust could talk like that. There will always be another think tank job for Max Boot, and people like Max Boot. But what's Politico's excuse? The fashionably liberal political blog has been pushing for war in Ukraine for months now. Why? What's in it for them? Well, let's see. A few days ago, Politico published this terrifying headline, quote, Saki, Russia could at any point launch an attack in Ukraine. The piece goes on to promise that, quote, experts and policymakers are now preparing for a range of escalatory measures. Well, that sounds scary. We better send billions more in military hardware to you right away. Beneath the headline, you learn why Politico's interested, because the story is, quote, presented by Lockheed Martin. Aha. In other words, defense contractors think it is high time to spend much more on defense contracting. In Politico is happy to make their case in exchange for money. Over at the Washington Post, you may have seen this op-ed with this headline, quote, Biden must show that the United States stands ready to support militarily if necessary. Now, that piece was written by a man called Michael Vickers. Who's Michael Vickers? Well, among other things, Michael Vickers sits on the board of the weapons contractor BAE Systems. Now, that would seem relevant because war with Russia would be, potentially in any case, highly profitable for BAE Systems. But somehow the Washington Post didn't bother to tell readers about this. It remained undisclosed. So how does this look from across the world? Well, the Chinese must be watching this happen with their jaws open, completely delighted. They can't believe their good fortune. They watch as the entire political leadership class of the United States runs at full speed in the wrong direction, away from Asia, which is so clearly the future, and toward the murky past on the fringes of Eastern Europe. Russia! And the Chinese must be wondering, how could these people be so stupid and so self-destructive?
Through the lens of this expose, Carlson compels us to re-examine the foundational principles of international cooperation and the preservation of peace.
These sanctions were never going to work in the way they promised because, unlike the United States, Russia does not have a late-stage finance economy. Russian oligarchs do not get rich from credit default swaps. They get rich from selling actual things that people need in order to live. Oil, natural gas, iron, fertilizer, coal, wheat. By some measures, Russia has the largest resource economy in the world. Oh, okay. So they could barter if they needed to. So a year later, despite the sanctions you were told are the greatest ever devised, the Russian ruble is just as strong against the US dollar as it was before the war. So we didn't really hurt Russia with those sanctions, certainly not long term. Who'd we hurt? Ourselves. E.J. Antoni and Peter St. Onge wrote an incisive piece in the Daily Caller last week that explains part of why this happened. Quote, a critical feature of a reserve currency is its apolitical nature, which Biden is now gutting. After both parties in Washington destroyed the dollar's stability with inflation, now the Biden administration has chosen to wield the dollar as a weapon. Together, these two factors send a message to foreigners, which is they should get out while they still can. In response to Russia's war with the U.S. froze the dollar reserves of Russia's central bank. To be clear, these were not American assets. These were dollars owned by the Russian central bank and the Russian people. The seizure was intended to cause bank runs and collapse Russia's credit system. It didn't work. Instead, it exposed the Biden administration's willingness to violate the trillions of dollars that foreigners rightfully own. The danger of this precedent is difficult to overstate, end quote. Now, all of us saw that happening, but you couldn't say anything because Russia...
Listen, a lot of this money, too, isn't just going to lethal aid anymore. We're propping up the government. We were paying salaries for people who were on the payroll, but they weren't real people.
Washington's intricate web of corruption is exposed, where $60 billion quietly funnels into questionable hands.
So you'd think someone would stand up and say, this is awful, but almost nobody has. Why? Because the position of the administration is, if you're not in favor of this, sending another $60 billion to the oligarchs, then you're working for Vladimir Putin. Well, why don't you just tell us why you're not voting for this?
Well, we can't afford it. Look, at some point, I realized we had spent more than we spend on all our roads and bridges in the United States. And I tweeted that. And Newsweek did a fact check on me. And what they found out is it was true.
These people cannot see themselves. A lady in a mask, presumably not on her way to rob a liquor store, but wearing it for health reasons, asked the national security advisor about the moral implications of a vote in the Congress. And he says with a straight face, anyone who doesn't support this legislation is helping Putin.
Congress members quietly endorse federal spending, conveniently channeling funds back to the military-industrial complex.
And so, they're saying the quiet part out loud, that congressmen tend to vote for this stuff because a lot of this federal spending that goes to is actually laundered back to the military-industrial complex. And in some ways, not very efficiently, but in some ways, it enriches people in their districts and the stockholders, some of whom are congressmen. When you get the fact checkers to admit that a conservative, when they give them a mostly true rating, it's a metaphysical certainty. And since then, we've spent twice as much as we do on all of our roads and bridges federally in the United States.
It's insanity, but it's intimidated almost the entirety of the U.S. Congress and certainly the Republican leadership, which is foursquare on the side of the Biden administration to continue this tragedy. There are very few members of Congress who dissent, and one of them who has done so consistently and in the most articulate possible way and on principle. Ever notice how the bigger the tragedy is, the harder it is for the people responsible to apologize? If I rear-end your car and increase your bumper, I'm happy to jump out and say, I'm sorry, I can't believe I did that. But if I were to say invade under false pretenses and million people and spend $1 trillion of your dollars doing it, I wouldn't say a word. I would never admit that was a bad idea. I couldn't. It implicates me too profoundly. The same goes for if I say, locked your kids inside for a year and their brains and prevented them from getting an education. Or if I say, forced you to take a vax that didn't work, that very well might have hurt you. I could never admit that I did that. I just couldn't. Because if I admitted it, I'd have to suffer the consequences. Something very much like that is happening with the war in Ukraine, which has been in progress now for almost 2 years. We were told at the beginning that our support would allow you to beat Russia and keep Russia from invading the rest of Europe or something. Well, almost 2 years in, none of that has turned out to be true. It's not going to beat Russia. The only person who's been beaten in this is the United States. The U.S. is weaker, measurably weaker, because of our support for in this. That's just true. The verdict is in. And honest, rational people admit that, no matter what their previous position. But the Biden administration cannot admit that, and neither can the U.S. Congress. And so now there is, believe it or not, an effort in progress to get the U.S. government to send another $60-odd billion to the oligarchs. So another generation of men, this one probably in their 50s, can in a pointless on the battlefield. They're not going to win, but the U.S. Congress would like to keep this conflict going anyway.
The moral obligation narrative emerges, painting dissent as a moral deficiency, skillfully manipulating public sentiment.
You sort of, that's also grotesque, but it's also straightforward. You know, people are getting rich, so let's do it. Okay, that's an argument. It's an immoral argument, but it is one. But that's not the argument they're making in public. They're saying we have a moral obligation. You're a bad person. You just heard the National Security Advisor say that you're a bad person if you're against this. But no one ever mentions that we have abetted the of an entire generation of men that will not be replaced to fight a war that they cannot win. They literally cannot win. We prevented a peace deal and we extended the war and we killed all these people. And so all the ones running around with their little flag pins, they're implicated in that. Has anyone apologized?
No, to support this money, you have to be economically illiterate and morally deficient. Those are both conditions of voting for this. Because to say that we're going to grind down Russia, that we're going to deplete their own soldiers by expending the lives, knowing that in the end, we're going to leave them holding the bag, that in the end, they can never prevail. They're not going to take back Crimea, even though we say that's one of the goals, when we can get them to state goals, which usually they won't. So it's morally reprehensible to say that you should fund this. And by the way, he says I'm a friend of Putin because I won't vote for this money. Well, I would say that I'm a friend of Americans and I'm putting America first. But he's part of, I would say, Putin's reelection campaign, because Putin is a Cold War relic that was elected in response to our Cold War relic, which is NATO. By expanding NATO, the neocons and the liberals, every time they push NATO closer to Russia, they help people like Putin get elected. That is money that could have gone to double our infrastructure. Yet we're blowing up infrastructure that we're going to end up, I hate this, but they're going to tell us that we have to rebuild it when this is all over with.
The scale of this insanity is hard to digest, and I think whatever empire comes after ours will spend time studying it, what not to do. But you got to wonder, why is the leadership of your party, the Republican Party, in favor of this? Why the new speaker, who seems like a nice guy, but also like a child? Why would his first act as speaker be to endorse this? I'm confused.
Well, I hope he doesn't, but Biden's budget director, the head of the OMB, sent a letter yesterday to Speaker Mike Johnson, imploring him to spend more money in. And what they said is they want to revitalize our defense industrial base. That's the new acronym, DIB, for the MIC, the Military Industrial Complex. And they sent a list of states that would get money when we spend, money.
Quantum entanglement. That's why channeling works.
Your brain is making connections it doesn't normally make.
We're more than our physical brain. We have access to much more than we think we do.
We'll describe it like you listening to the radio, and you have to tune to frequency.
Even if they are in different galaxies, they are entangled. That's quantum mechanics.
Crazy military headphones are disrupting the billion-dollar earphone market. Dude, you got to hear about these wild bone conduction things. It's like having an extra pair of ears. Picture this. A new sound tech developed for U.S. Special Forces is dominating the market here. Imagine headphones that don't go in your ears but vibrate your skull for pristine sound. Crazy, right? And the kicker? No ear blockage means full awareness of surroundings. So, these headphones were invented by a U.S. Army engineer to keep soldiers connected in the field without losing awareness. Here's a crazy bit of history. This whole bone conduction thing is centuries-old technology. It got its inspiration from Beethoven, the 18th century composer, right? The guy was almost totally deaf, but figured out he could hear his piano by biting down on the steel rod he connected to, picking up vibrations through his jaw. That's wild, right? So this military engineer hears about this story and goes, boom, that's it, and starts rigging up these headsets for the troops. They tested it out in the field, and the results they got were absolutely stunning. They could hear commands in crystal clear audio quality while still being aware of their surroundings. Fast forward, he gets the patent, lands a cool 2.5 mil in funding, and starts rolling these out for the troops. And now he's flipping the script and bringing it to folks like you and me. He calls it Sound Rev. It looks like an open ear headset, but it doesn't go into your ears. Instead, it sends sound through your cheekbones right to your inner ear, keeping your ears open to hear everything else around you. You can rock out or chat while staying aware, preventing accidents and catering to hearing issues or sensitive ears. Perfect for any activity indoors or out. It stays connected via Bluetooth to whatever gadget you've got, phone, tablet, laptop, and it's tough, man. Waterproof, sweatproof, built for an active lifestyle with a battery that lasts for days. When SoundRev hit the market, it exploded. Like, it sold out in 2 days. People were showing off this bone conduction tech on social media, and it went viral. The company is pushing to make sure everyone can buy one, cutting prices and offering bulk discounts. So if you're thinking about it, now's the time. He's offering a 50% discount if you order today. Snag one for yourself, maybe grab a few as gifts. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on this deal. Hit up their website by clicking the link below, grab that 50% discount, and get ready to own this revolutionary bone conduction technology before it's sold out.
Money on munitions because they have to be manufactured in Alabama or Ohio or Texas.
Toria Nuland steps into the spotlight, a key player shaping the narrative as the Undersecretary of State.
Do you think it's strange that, maybe the single most consequential voice in this entire debate is a woman called Toria Nuland, who's the Undersecretary of State, who was a driving force behind which was, of course, a disaster and hurt the United States. She was never punished for that. In fact, she rose within the bureaucracy, and now she's running this. No one ever says her name. She's never held to account for all of this. She has far more influence on it than the entire United States Congress put together. How do we allow unelected lunatics like Toria Nuland, who clearly hates the United States and always has, to have this power over our lives and our children's future?
I don't know. I feel like some of these deep state bureaucrats, they're like the kids who had no friends in high school. And somebody did something bad to them long ago. And now they've got some power and they realize how to grab it. And they're gonna have retribution on everybody else. Victoria Nuland was at a classified briefing to all members of Congress just a few weeks ago. And I thought, and this was on, and I thought, wait, she's failed multiple times. Why are you dragging her out she has no credibility. Why are you having her brief Congress right now?
It's, outside our borders, it's very obvious that the whole world is resetting and that American influence is in very rapid decline, thanks in large part to this, and that Russia is now joining this coalition, which will be the majority of the world's population and economy and military strength aligned against us. So this is resetting the world to our disadvantage. Again, leave the country. It's obvious your first day that.
Discover your new Hyundai right now at Quirk Hyundai at Bangor. Like the 2024 Hyundai Sonata, lease for $248 per month for 36 months. The search is over. Visit us today at Quirk Hyundai at Bangor.
This is happening very fast. Does anyone in Washington see that?
No, there are very few. I've been voting against these resolutions and the money going since 2014. In 2014, we helped to overthrow their elected government. And we were saber rattling against Russia. And I said, listen, these sanctions and this saber rattling and these resolutions, they're going to have consequences. And they have had consequences. Almost nobody in Washington, D.C. will admit this through their voting record. Now, they know it, but they won't admit it and they won't vote that way.
Ghost payrolls unmasked, salaries channeled to non-existent entities, unraveling the intricacies of financial deception.
I don't understand why the co-equal branch of government, the legislative branch, the Congress, allows itself to be manipulated by the intel agencies and the National Security Council. It seems like really crazy and masochistic even.
Well, listen, a lot of this money, too, isn't just going to lethal aid anymore. We're propping up the government. We're paying salaries of politicians and we're paying pensions of politicians in. Yesterday, I met with the Special Inspector General over, and I found out we've spent $6 billion there since we left. There's still money going to. And he said, you really need, he doesn't want the job, but he said, you really need a Special Inspector General over. And I said, what do you think? Where could they be hiding some of this money, or where could it be going? And he said, well, look at what they did. 30 or 40% of the special, the police and their security forces didn't exist. We were paying salaries for people who were on the payroll, but they weren't real people. And now that we're paying salaries, how do we know that those are real people? As a matter of fact, we saw with the PPP program in the United States, people were getting money to pay people that weren't even on their payroll. So there are lots of obvious places to look for waste, fraud. I wouldn't be funding it to start with. But if we are going to fund it, we need to have somebody auditing this.
A psychological operation unfolds, orchestrating a struggle session to rally support for increased funding.
She's responsible, or shares responsibility of more people around the world than maybe any other living American. And yet she's in a classified briefing? I mean, I'm not saying she should be in prison, though you could certainly make a case for that. But she certainly should not have a security clearance and be briefing members of Congress. Did anybody say, wait a second, there's nobody more discredited than you are, Toria Nuland? Did anyone say that?
Nobody did. By the way, these classified briefings, they're basically propaganda spoon-fed to members of Congress directly from the deep state and from the administration. So we're going to have one today, in fact, on. We will all file into an auditorium and leave our cell phones at the door. And we're just, I'm sure this is going to be sort of a psyop or struggle session to get us to vote for more money to go to.
It's such a humiliating way to end the American empire, such a self-destructive way. I don't think people fully understand just how deep in the hole we are. I noticed that on your blazer, you've got some kind of device, which I think tells us the answer. Can you explain it?
Yeah, so, I went to MIT, I'm an electrical engineer, and I wondered how I could use my degree here in Congress. And I decided to build a debt clock that I could wear all the time. I wear it on the floor, I wear it in every hearing. And the design goal was to induce anxiety. We have congressmen and senators who have pacemakers. I thought they needed, their heart shouldn't be normal. It should be skipping beats and arrhythmic. So I built this to induce that anxiety. It's working pretty well so far. In fact, some congressmen, they vote, they put their voting card in, they press yay to spend the money, and then they look at my lapel to see if it's immediate enough to show the impact of their vote. But really, we need more people to be concerned about the debt. The interest on this is now going to overtake all of our military spending. We'll soon be paying more for interest on the debt than we do for our entire military.
The United States is a fundamentally racist country, and it's an immoral place, fundamentally, from its inception. And nobody said anything about it.
In the end, most governments are run by a small group of people for their own benefit without reference to what the majority wants.
Tucker